Welcome to Bandit's Keep. I'm Daniel. In this video, we're going to talk a little bit about player skill. Now, this is one of those words that gets bounced around a lot, and there's different definitions. And so I'm just going to kind of start by talking about that and what I mean and kind of what inspired this video. And then we'll talk a little bit about it. What I'm really hoping to do here is start a conversation, get some input from you guys in the comments below, because I think this really is a very interesting subject. In any case, depending on the game you're playing, player skill could be defined a lot of different ways. If I was playing something like 3rd edition Dungeons & Dragons or Pathfinder 1, as I understand them, and I'm no expert in those systems, part of player skill might be the build of the character, right? There's lots of ways that you can prepare your character and build them and put feats together to work with the party and create that. And even though you're not at the table doing that, that's still part of the skill of being a player. A successful player in those games is going to understand how these things get put together. They're not going to, utilize things that are going to be ineffective for their character and stuff like that. That would be successful player skill in a game like that. In the types of games that I usually run, which are more fall into the old school category, we often define player skill as creative out-of-the-box thinking. That is not looking at the character sheet. You hear people say that a lot, although we'll talk about that a little bit. And just what would I do? Figuring out a puzzle, doing these different things. And now this can be tricky, and maybe we'll make some more videos about this, about puzzles and so on, because obviously if you have somebody who wants to play a really smart magic user, but maybe isn't that good at puzzles and stuff, that might be weird, right? So that's a whole other video. Let's start with this. What inspired me to talk about this actually is a video over on page 121. I'll put a link in the description. It's a pretty cool channel. He goes over a lot of AD&D, a lot of Traveler stuff. Seems like a really nice guy. And he was talking about the Tomb of Horrors, which is one of those modules that you hear a lot of people criticize for many things. But some people have said it's the worst module ever. Some people say it's the best module. Some people say it's somewhere in the middle, which is probably closer to right. And I want to talk, and what I thought was interesting here was the idea of player skill, because in his video he mentioned several times, well, it says in the module that this requires player skill, but I don't see how this is player skill. So this video is kind of my answer to that in a way. Not in a negative way. The video is great. Watch it. I agree with a lot of what he says there, and I get a really good presentation of the module. So check out that video, and let me talk about this for a second. When we are running especially high-level characters, and this is one reason why, to cut to the side here for a second, this is one reason why I'm not a fan of taking people who are unfamiliar with the system and giving them really powerful or high-level characters at first. Even in more simple games like OSR games, there can be too much going on, and there's also a certain understanding of the world and of the way the system is often played, the expected play experience at the table that they may not be familiar with. That is to say that if somebody is used to working in a system that, let's say, is a skill-based system, let's say they're playing Traveler or they're playing Call of Cthulhu, and you give them a swords and wizardry character with no skills, they may feel like, what can I do? And when you're a first-level character dealing with first-level problems, that's okay, right? They can learn, oh, I see, I can kind of do whatever I want. I'm going to do this and this and this. But if you give them a 20th level character, or that's probably crazy high, you give them a 9th level character who's a really powerful character and is expected to overcome amazing obstacles, they may not have built up what is the player's skill to really successfully navigate that type of environment. Now, obviously, play styles vary, so this is not 100% for everybody, but the idea that in my mind, when you're talking about player skill, is that the players are going to be faced with something that isn't easily overcome with the normal means of using what they've got. So let's say there's a pit trap, right? You've got a 10-foot wide corridor. They see in front of them a sprung pit trap, let's say, or somebody steps on it, it collapses, but nobody falls in. And you look down, you get this 20-foot pit trap with skeletons at the bottom or something. It's 10 foot wide. How are we going to cross this? There is no rules per se in most of these older games about jumping, but most people are probably not going to be able to jump across a 10-foot pit safely in armor and with equipment. So maybe they're going to say, well, I have a coil of rope. I'm going to lower myself down to the pit with my friends holding it, walk to the other side, climb up somehow, maybe throw a grapple or whatever, and climb up. And now we're going to take our turns doing that. Okay, well, that could work. But let's say 3 rooms prior, there was a kitchen. And in that kitchen, there was a large table that had preparations on it. A skill player, one that's been playing for a while, will think, well, hold on, we can go 2 rooms back, grab that table and make a bridge. not only will it get us across faster, which means we're not going to take as much time here, which means our resources like torches and, of course, meta wandering monsters are going to be less common, but also we can run back across faster. With this idea, it works great, but now we're sacrificing the rope that we might need later for something else. This pit could be traversed another way. This is another way to handle it that isn't the straight up, this makes sense to me. Another way might be, I'm going to actually bang pittons into the wall, and we're not going to go down the pit. We're going to put a pit in the wall and step over and lean over and put another one and make a bridge across the side, right? Something like that. This is a different way to handle, because what if the skeletons in the bottom are going to attack you, right? So there's lots of ways. Or what if instead of skeletons down there, there's lava or acid or a pit full of snakes, of the venomous snakes. So you've got these different levels, right? So your first level character encountering their first pit with no spikes down there is going to say, okay, rope, that's the obvious solution. Lower somebody down, go across, climb up the other side, boom. Now you're at a third or fourth level of the dungeon, and these pit traps have flame jets or, again, monsters down there that are crocodiles jumping up at you. This is how we increase the level of complexity allow the players to keep thinking out of the box, right? They no longer run into the 10 or 20 foot pit that at first level they could traverse very easily with rope. And now they're running into strangely shaped things. But even when players advance, it makes it interesting to make them have to go back in their mind and think about the thing that they might have done in the past. So let's say, for instance, now I'm going to give some spoilers here for Tomb of Horrors. I'll put a note actually here to jump forward to where they end. I'll look at the time and stuff. So there's a room in Tomb of Horrors, I'm not going to get too far into it, where there are tapestries on the wall. And these tapestries magically turn, when you pull them down, they transform into molds and slimes and stuff. And there is an anti-magic field on them, so it cannot be detected that they are magical, and this is going to happen. And this happens when you tear down the tapestries. Okay, I've played in Tomb of Horrors, and nobody that I played with went over and tore down the tapestries. In one case, they used a pole or something else that was in the room to push the tapestry to the side to make sure there was nothing behind it. And in that case, the slime fell down on the pole and destroyed it, and then they were able to kill it. In another case, then for the second one, because there's two in there, they were like, well, clearly this is a problem, and they burned it, right? So this is player skill. This is a player understanding how to overcome these things. If you just grab at tapestries in a dungeon, they're probably going to mess you up, especially in a high-level dungeon known for lethality, known for traps that are terrible, right? Gotcha traps, terrible traps. This is done purposefully. The dungeon is designed as a test, as a way to really mess with and push the players past where they normally think. You've got these high-level characters that normally just cast spells left and right. In some rooms, the spells don't work. Now what do you do? This is where player skill comes in, and they have to revert back. They have to think back to when I was playing a first-level character, what would I have done in this room? Would I have randomly walked up and pulled a tapestry down, knowing that a kobold on the other side could stab me and take me out? No, right? I'd be careful with it. I'd test it. I'd poke it. I'd stand back. This is player skill. This is that I'm talking about. This is those kind of things. Just taking things out of the normal context of what you think, being aware of where you are, thinking about the fact that you're in a certain kind of dungeon. And this is what telegraphing is super important. I did a video with Todd a while back, a live stream. We talked about this. When you are in Tomb of Horrors, you run into a series of traps right at the very beginning. You understand. In fact, it even says in the module, I think, that you're supposed to tell players, this is a death trap. This is a death trap. It's traps. It's not full of monsters. It's full of traps. They should be ready. Now, again, without giving away too much from Tomb of Horrors, I'll stay in it, though. That way I can keep going over here. I hadn't played Dungeons & Dragons in a long time. And I was at a convention. This is before 5th edition, I would imagine. And I saw, it was like a geeky convention. There was like a lot of art stuff going on, whatever. And I saw there was a game of Dungeons & Dragons. And it said, the classic adventure, Tomb of Horrors. Now, I had never played Tomb of Horrors as a kid because we didn't have it. I had a handful of modules, White Plume Mountain, a few other ones. We never played it. I didn't know what it was. I was like, cool. Well, right at the very beginning of Tomb of Horrors is a whole bunch of traps, as I mentioned. And we had a thief in the party, and they got struck a couple of times by these traps because everybody did the thing that people do, send the thief forward. And I was playing a magic user who was like, I don't know, like 10th level, but I think I had like 15 hit points. It was because I had like a 3 con or some crazy thing. And what happened was we got in there, and after the thief took a handful of points of damage on various dumb traps, they refused to go first. They're like, I'm not going for that. I'm not checking traps. which honestly in the tournament game is a little bit, but that's a whole other video. So I was like, all right, well, clearly there's a bunch of pit traps I don't want to fall in. So I was like, what have I got? I had a 10-foot pole. I had a levitate spell. And I thought, I'll levitate to the ceiling, work my way across, smacking the floor as I go, listening for any hollow spots. I revealed a whole bunch of traps on the floor as we went down, making the passageway clear. We revealed, also in Tomb of Horrors, it's like a poem. We looked at the poem on the floor, and I was like, hold on, didn't we see something? And again, I don't want to give away too much here. And we went back, and we couldn't find a secret door via the skill check way, but I was like, we know there's something here. So again, I took my staff, because I had a staff and a 10-foot pole, I must have been like, and I started banging on the wall, because it was all plaster. And sure enough, it chipped away, and there was a door there. This is player skill. It's the things that we forget about when we get at higher level and we stop thinking about these things, because we have automatic secret door finder. We have this here. These little things that were fun at first level and second level, we forget about. So now we've got these high level characters, and this can challenge them because they're not thinking the way they thought as low level characters. I actually played the whole thing through Tomb of Horrors as in 5th edition. And it was really fun. My friend Andy ran it. It was fun because of the group. Actually, it was terrible in 5th edition. I would never run it in 5th edition. And the reason why I say this is not because I do not like 5th edition at all. I've played plenty of awesome modules in that. It's not designed for those kind of characters. The 5th edition characters are designed with skills, with abilities, with all these things. And what happens is when you have perception skills and investigation skills and all stuff, what you start doing is you start rolling a lot, right? And it's like, even if you say the right thing, a lot of times the DM will be like, well, okay, we'll roll your investigation to see if you find this roll. And people fall back on that. And why shouldn't they? That's part of the game, right? That's part of how you play that game. So we have to approach each module, not just if you're going to play a module in a different edition, you don't want to play it straight. You want to think about, what was this module designed for? What was the point of this module? What made it challenging at the time? What made it interesting? And use that. So I don't recommend that 5th edition book that has all the old modules in it, because I found none of them were fun in 5th edition personally. If you love them in 5th edition, let me know. But what I actually said was, when we finished, I was like, we should run this with first level characters in this game. And it would have been a challenge. Because in Tomb of Horrors, there's not a whole lot of combat. This is not a secret, I don't think. So anyways, off of that, so we don't have to have spoilers. Boy, that was a big chunk of the video. Let's talk about a few examples of what I would call player skill in games that I have run very recently, and you can tell me below if you agree, or give me some samples of things that people have done in your games that you would consider this kind of player skill in the OSR way. Last night, I was running an adventure that I'm playtesting with Gen Con, and there is a trap. It is, again, it's an unusual trap. It's in a 5-foot wide corridor. It's a pit trap, and it is 10 foot long. So again, you're not going to be jumping over this thing. And it's a teeter. So you walk on one side, nothing happens. When you get on the other side, you fall down and it floats back up, right? So it's a simple trap like that. Well, the dwarf leading the party comes into this long corridor, and they're like, long corridor. Is there any slanting passages or anything here? So I roll, and I'm like, the dwarf notices that it's slightly tilted, right? So they see it. So like, you see this is tilted here, and she goes up and she investigates, and she's like, okay, she lifts it up, she looks, she's like, all right, well, I'm going to plate my armor in one of the heaviest people. I'll stand on this end, and everybody can walk across. Right? It sounds really simple. You don't need magic. What you need is to think about what you would do in that situation and do it. Don't worry about if there's a rule for it, if there's a ability, if there's a skill. You're just kind of doing it. You're role playing. You're in the character. You're doing what you think your character would do logically. Now, in the same adventure, they got surrounded by gray oozes, but they were right near the edge of a 100-foot pit, and which they were eventually going to climb down, but they were like surrounded by these things. So that same player, Crystal, grabbed her shield and said, I'm not going to attack it. Normally, I'm going to use my shield and scoop it and try to push it into the hole. There's no rule for that. What's the rule for that? How would you even do that? Especially in an old school game. I adjudicated it. She did it successfully. I'm like, you're going to lose your shield if you do this. Fine. Magic shield at that. Poof. One ooze goes down, gives them some room to move around, gives them some leverage. They win the combat, right? Smart moves. Not doing the obvious thing. A few adventures back, my player, Nikki, was kind of invisible, and a couple of the other players were being confronted by guards, and they needed to get out through this way without causing too much of a commotion. and not to bring down all these archers on them and everything. So she had the summon monsters, or summon animal spell. So instead of summoning something to attack the guards, she summoned monsters to fight with each other. So all of a sudden the guard's like, what's going on here? And it created confusion. Again, a good way to use a skill, the spell that's not what you would imagine, right? Most people summon a monster to fight the bad guys. This was have them fight each other, right? That way there's like a scuffle in the street and people are gathering. What's going on here? Why are these monsters fighting? They're wolves. So this is the type of thing that to me is a player skill, good player skill, things that we learn as we play, right? That's why there's oh God, if I can think of the name of it, somebody tell me in the comments, but I'll try to find it and put it I'll put a link if I can find it. There's a module that was designed to teach players how to OSR, and it like has all these things, repeated things, traps. And I think this is a very good idea. If you are bringing your group into this style of play and bring them in at lower levels, I know the temptation is let them be higher levels so they can have more spells or more hit points. Bring them in at lower levels, let them overcome what to more experienced players is a simple thing. In a creative way, it will make them feel empowered and it'll allow them to understand that this is how we progress through the game. One more spoiler for Tomb of Horrors. One of the most famous things that I ever heard was that there's an area where there's basically a sphere of annihilation, and they're like, oh, people just walked into it and died. That is, I cannot imagine any party doing that because I've never seen an old school player not poke a hole with a 10-foot pole before they went into it. So, and that would have destroyed the 10-foot pole. So, no, I don't believe that that's actually true. I don't believe anybody actually walked a whole party in there. I do believe people lost body parts or lost a party member climbing into it or something because that person just wasn't thinking and climbed into a dark space. It doesn't make any sense. Why wouldn't you at least stick a torch in there or something? Like, it doesn't make any sense. So again, that's the player skill. You're giving players who aren't used to playing these high-level complex dungeons, high-level complex traps, and that's why adventures like this can be very, very difficult for players that are new to this style of adventure. So we need to consider the level of player skill that, experience, we'll call it. And maybe skill isn't even the right word. Maybe in the end, it's player experience. Hopefully, you learn with experience, right? Unless you have a really low wisdom. And maybe this player experience is going to help those players become better problem solvers because problem solving is part of the game, at least to me. I look at D&D as a game. I think that you're trying to succeed. I know people don't like the word win, but you're trying to succeed. You're trying to overcome obstacles. And this is something that we are using our character sheets for. If we're using a more skill-based game, we're using our character sheets for. If we're running an OSR game and we're looking at what we have, do we have a 10-foot pole? Do we have enough rope? Did somebody bring a pulley? Do we have spikes? Did somebody bring marbles to throw on the ground? Do we have chalk dust to throw on this creature that's invisible? These are all things that buying your, like the same way you build your character in 3rd edition, buying that equipment in an OSR game is part of player skill. Looking at the equipment list, knowing how much gold you have, how much encumbrance you have, and saying, what's important for me to bring in here? Should I spend the extra gold on some silver arrows? Should I get myself some extra torches? Or should I just use a lantern? How much oil should I bring? Should I bring rations to throw down if monsters are chasing me? This is all stuff that is a player skill that we acquire over time in these games. And it can be really fun, in my opinion, to let the dice fall where they may, as it would be, and let the players come up with really interesting solutions and let them work if they make sense. I'm going to talk a little bit about illusions as well here, although I'm probably going to do a whole video on illusions. Let me know if you want to hear about illusions and how they can be used and some examples and stuff. But let's just talk very basically here and say illusions are another one of those places where a well-placed Phantasmal Force spell, for instance, can be way more useful than a fireball or a lightning bolt. Illusions are very powerful, but you've got to be creative with it. You want to think about what illusion you can make, how it could affect things. Sometimes a wall to hide you from the enemies. Sometimes a creature to scare people away. One of the popular thing that my players do a lot is an illusion of a Medusa, right? And when they see it, they think they see Medusa. If they fail their save, it would be a spell save in this case, not turn to stone. They think they're frozen, turn to stone. They're like, they freeze, right? So this is very cool. I mean, it doesn't last forever, but they basically, are helpless for a second. And you know what that means. There's lots of cool ways to use spells and illusions, and I think that also falls into player skill, but maybe that's a whole other video. Like I said, I just wanted to tack that on here because I know that's one of the areas. Let me know what you guys think. Am I off base here? Do you think player skill is something different? Do you think this isn't important? Do you think that modules that have lots of complex traps or things like that are bad? All right, so let me know what you guys think about this. Some comments below. I think next week I'm going to do a adventure creation video. That's what I was going to do today until I watched that video from page 121. So thank you for that video. It inspired me to talk about this really kind of randomly and briefly, hopefully briefly. And I'll see you next time.